Hi readers, Lee here. Welcome back to my channel, Lila Wanders and Reads, and welcome to my July reading wrap-up. I'm going to go mostly in order except for this first series that I read, and in July I did Christmas in July, where I tried to read a good deal of Christmas books, and I'm not sure how I succeeded. However, interspersed through some of the other books that I read the Hartbridge Christmas series by N.R. Walker. There are 4 books, standalone books, set in Hartbridge, Montana, I think, and they are heartwarming, queer romances, a little bit spicy for my taste, but they really served a purpose this month because I read some really heavy books, and they were great at lightening up my heart after I'd read something heavy. I started the month with, I'm going to try not to have an avalanche here, Count the Ways by Joyce Maynard. Sorry. And I enjoyed this book. There were some noteworthy parts of it. But I found myself, this was the beginning of a trend. I ended up reading some family sagas here and books about queer men. So this was a family saga that I'm really on the fence about. I have the sequel to this, and while I did enjoy it, it just felt a little bit long for me. Next up, on the audiobook side, I finished and loved When the Sea Came Alive, An Oral History of D-Day by Garrett M. Graff. I think I've talked about this on a short earlier this month. I know I talked about it on a short earlier last month, where I really love that he has different voices. I listened to that, so he had different voices reading the oral histories, and that really makes the experience come alive, just like the sea for me. Sorry, I'm writing down my notes so I don't forget to put them in. But I really enjoyed that oral history. It led me to another oral history. Another book I will talk about D-Day at the very end. Moving on. As I got further and further away from this next book, I liked it less and less. And that book was The 12 Dates of Christmas. I didn't have any problem with the 12 dates. That was kind of funny and light-hearted. But when I sat on this for a while after finishing it, so Kate is doing 12 dates to get back out there, but of course she finds the love of her life was always under her nose. But they had stopped being friends years before, when after a one-night stand, the main lead male told her he didn't want to be friends with her anymore. He didn't like her anymore. And then he gets mad at her after they've already become friends again. Then he gets mad at her for allegedly breaking up his relationship and stopped speaking to her. And it's just really ugly to her. And then, of course, they realize that they love each other. And no, a person that treats you like that is not the love of your life. I am sorry. But he treated her shittily until it was convenient for him. And then now all is forgiven. And don't let people treat you that way. Anywho, I was pissed off about that, and I was having a conversation with my boss and a colleague at work, and they started talking about different novels, and it reminded me of Island in the Sea of Time by S.M. Stirling, so I did a reread of this, and really enjoyed it, but this is a long book, and it felt a little bit long. What I said about this, I still love the book, but sometimes there's too much description. They do a whole page and a half about a specific gun that they're making or remaking or something like that, and a woman who's in there says, I'm just not an enthusiast. And I'm like, girl, same, because it was just too detailed. I like detail, and I like the idea of figuring out how you're going to recreate stuff when you've been sent back in time. And I really enjoyed the book, but it just sometimes, I think that slowed it down a little bit for me. Next up, I went back to Christmas with The Afterlife of Holly Chase by Cynthia Hand, and this is probably my favorite book, Christmas book, that I read this month, last month. This was a book about redemption and second chances, even though you don't know it. Well, you do know it because it's a Scrooge tale. But I really loved it, and it just wrapped everything up perfectly for me. And that is what I needed right then. Next up, I went with Claire Oshetsky's Poor Dear. That's a book I've had on my shelf for a while. This was referred to as a dark fairy tale, and it really is. This was definitely a different kind of read for me. And I really enjoyed it. Would I read it again? Probably, because I've already forgotten the ending. Definitely a different read. Definitely dark. But again, another story about redemption and second chances. Whew. The next one was rough for me. I went through phases of wanting to put the book down and walk away, not because it was bad, because it was so good that it was breaking my heart. And then when I would pick it back up, I couldn't stop reading. So that book was Shuggie, Bain by Douglas Stuart. This book is heartbreaking. It's about a young gay boy growing up in Scotland and his alcoholic mother who he loves and tries to save. And this was the winner of the 2020 Booker Prize. I can see why. It is excellent. It leaves you, in my opinion, with a little bit of hope. I don't want to read you the last sentence, but it left me with a little bit of hope. But there is so much trauma and neglect and just sorrow in this book that, whew, that after this one, I had to pick up the fourth Hartbridge book because I needed some fucking Disney and Hallmark stuff. Next up, I read a book that Greg from Supposedly Fun recommended that not many people know about. I adored this book. This is going to go up as one of my favorite reads of the year. This is Address Unknown by Katherine Kressman Taylor. The ending, chef's kiss. I had to tell my colleague at work who doesn't read about this because I loved this book and I want to tell everybody about it. This was set in 1932 and 1933. It is set in Hitler's coming to power and what's leading up to what will be the Holocaust. But it also really refers to the dangers of Nazi Germany, and brilliant. This was published in 1938. So it kind of dispels the myth that no one knew what was going on with regard to the Jews in Nazi Germany even before the war started. Next up was my Book of the Month selection, and I've got mixed feelings about this one too. Another family saga that I did not expect. I expected it to be more of a mystery, maybe even almost thriller, and that was The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. It was part of that, but it went through years and years, and while I did enjoy it, I think that because I was expecting something different, if you hear that buzzing back in the background, that's my dryer. So I was expecting something different, but there was a twist at the end that I did not see coming. But it made everything, it kind of tied everything together. Next up, I went down memory lane. I had 4, I think, of this series, but I ended up having to buy the first 3 to complete the series, but I only read one of them. And that is the Power series. This book is called The Possession by Jessie Harris, and that's her pen name. This was a fun little read. When I talked about memory lane, what is kind of fun to me is there's this a couple parts in here where the main character, Mackenzie, is trying to get somewhere, and she opens her glove box and pulls out a physical map. So that was kind of fun to read and remember, because I used to do that. I was raised reading a physical map and doing navigation that way. I don't do it anymore, but I do have an atlas in my vehicle just in case. Next up, I went back to Christmas, and I did A Winter in New York with Josie by Josie Silver. I normally like her books. I loved One Day in December. This one was just okay for me. It was set in 2 different timelines. And it involved a lie or a lie of omission. And that gives me anxiety because even though that's a big trope, it gives me anxiety because my mom always taught me that if you do something wrong or make a mistake, you need to come and fess up about it at the get-go, because it'll be much better if you do. It's better to come clean at the beginning, because otherwise all that anxiety is going to build up behind you. And she could have just... It could have been a totally different story, but then it probably wouldn't have been a romance. So anyway, but I did like that a lot better than the 12 Dates of Christmas. Many of the Christmas books, Hartbridge series aside, deal with grief. That one does. The 12 Dates of Christmas, sort of. And I just don't want grief in my Christmas. I want Hallmark. I can deal with a little spicy if it's Hallmark. I want happiness. I want Christmas. The next book, I've got to say, blew my mind, and I'm deciding if it's going to go on my favorite books of the year shelf. That is Recursion by Blake Crouch. I picked this up because Victoria from Australia asked about time travel books or something like that, and that led me to a whole time travel video where I talked about books I had that involved time travel and books that I bought because I have a problem. Anywho, in this book, reality is broken, and it acts like it, or looks like a disease, but it is not. And when you figure out what's going on and how the time travel occurs, it was just amazing. Intricately plotted, it says. A tale about time, identity, and memory. And a rare thriller that will astonish you not just once, but again and again. I didn't get so much thriller, although there were some thrilling moments, but just the time travel was very interesting to me. I loved this book. Highly recommend. Next up, I did a buddy read with Floss over at the Grape Jelly Library, and that was Sandwich by Katherine Newman. I need to go rewatch Floss's video on this, and I might do my own short video about this. I loved this book. I think I would have loved it more if I wasn't limited to 50 pages a day. I think that kind of, it's 226 pages. I could have gobbled that up in an evening. But again, I will go rewatch Floss's video about Sandwich and probably make a video of my own for like Wednesday maybe. Not sure. Anywho, I enjoyed it. I love a book that has a sense of humor, and there was a lot of humor in here. Real, like, family humor, you know? Okay, so I was reading Sandwich over a couple of days, and while I was reading that, I did read 3 Holidays and a Wedding by Uzma Jalaluddin and Marissa Stapley. I ended up giving this 2.5 stars, rounded up to 3 on Goodreads. It's a story about a group of people who get stranded at Christmas, not where they're supposed to be, where they were trying to be traveling. And I loved the first half of the book, but by the end, the characters just fell a little flat for me. And so it was fine. Glad I read it, but will I read anything again by either of them? Probably not, unless I stumble upon it accidentally. The final book of the month is one I started at the beginning of the month and ended. That is Andrew Roberts' The Storm of War. It calls itself A New History of the Second World War, but as I said in the short, he relies on a lot of the old histories as opposed to primary sources. I'm sure there's some in here, but there's a lot of almost every other paragraph he was referring back to a primary source. One of those primary sources was Stephen Ambrose, D-Day. This is one I'm still listening to on audiobook, and if I knew then, because I started these about the same time-ish, if I knew then what I knew that now, I would have read this and listened to this. There were some... I learned something in here, for sure, but there were a couple places where, one example, he said something occurred on Christmas Day, but every other source I looked at said it happened on Christmas Eve. And that may seem like a minor thing, but I am a stickler for details. I like things to be correct. So this was just okay for me. Again, I wish I had read this and listened to this, because this one's great. Now I kind of wish I could read this, but I've already started. It's got pictures too. I've already started listening to it, and I'm at like I'm on chapter 19, I think. Yes. So I'm about that far through. I would have been finished with the book. It's less than 600 pages, so I would have been finished with it a long time ago. But really enjoying this. Maybe one day I'll pick it up to read the physical copy again. And that concludes my month in books. That was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 18 books. And the Hartbridge books were very short. I could read them in an hour or two. So, that's how I got so many. Anywho, I'd love to hear what you read in June. If you have any thoughts about any of these books, again, I'd love to hear them. And any recommendations, just leave me a note down in the comments. I try to answer all my comments. And that is it. I will be back tomorrow. And I'm not sure what I'm coming back with. Maybe a book haul. Maybe a little short chat about Sandwich. We'll see. Happy reading!